When winter is in full swing, I love to make homemade pies. And this one's not a meat pie. Look away if you don't like mushrooms. It's all about mushrooms. I'm going to be using 1 kilo of mushrooms in this. This is a really delicious dish because if you are a vegetarian, the mushrooms almost act as a substitute for meat. In a saute pan, I've just been cooking off some leeks. Now, leeks are fantastic to give some sweetness, but I want to accentuate the sweetness in the leeks, and that's why I like to add a little bit of caster sugar. So 1 tablespoon of caster sugar, and this is also going to caramelize and almost make it a little bit toffee-like. But I will be balancing this out with some vinegar, and once it starts to caramelize a little bit, I'll deglaze with red wine vinegar, and that's going to give it a really intense flavour. Now I'll just turn that down a little bit while we get onto the mushrooms. Now I've got a variety of mushrooms. First in this bowl here, 30 grams of dried porcini mushrooms. Now you can get dried porcini mushrooms from most supermarkets now and your delis. I've rehydrated them in about 300 millilitres of warm water. Now you can see the colour of the water, it's changed colour. This makes an instant stock, and don't throw that water away because I will be using it in the dish a little later on. Now for the mushrooms, I just adore mushrooms. I just love how they've all got different flavours and different textures. These are oyster mushrooms, these are Swiss brown mushrooms, the good old classic button mushroom, but they hold their shape really nicely in a stew like this for the pie. And then these are a showstopper, pine mushrooms. These are fantastic because, again, they're really meaty and they smell like pines because they grow under pine trees. Now I'm going to chop these up really roughly. So with a sharp knife, we're going to cut lengthways. Once I've roughly chopped all the mushrooms, they go in with the leeks and they're going to cook for about 15 minutes or until a lot of the moisture has evaporated and they start to caramelize and collapse a little bit. Now you can see after 15 minutes these mushrooms collapse significantly. I'll now add these porcini mushrooms. They've softened, so just gather them in your hand and then squeeze out the excess water. Now I'm just going to roughly chop this and then they can go in and warm up with the other mushrooms. And now for some extra flavour in this recipe, a little bit of mustard. Mustard is going to give it a piquancy that we're looking for. I also like to add some peppercorns. Peppercorns are going to give it a little bit of a heat, but these aren't just your average peppercorns. These are your green peppercorns, and they're quite mild in flavour and soft. So we'll take them out of the brine and just sprinkle them in there. Now I haven't seasoned these mushrooms yet, so I'll add a good pinch of salt. Mushrooms need a good amount of salt so you can really taste their flavour. And then we'll mix all of that in. Turn the heat down a little bit. And now I'll add a little bit of flour because we'll need to thicken this up because it is a pie, so about a tablespoon, and just sprinkle it over the top. And when you're using flour, you need to cook it off. So what I'll do is just mix it around and you'll see it change colour and go a little bit sandy. If you don't cook it off, we'll taste the flour in this mushroom stew. We don't want that at all. We just want to taste the mushrooms and the red wine, which is what I'll be adding next. Now I want this to reduce by 2/3 so we get a really deep concentrated red wine flavour. Then I'll add this remaining stock, the mushroom stock, and cook it for a further 10 to 15 minutes or until it really thickens up and holds like a pie mixture. Then I'll cool it down and we'll go on to the next stage. Okay, so the mushrooms are completely cooked, it's thickened up, and I've just allowed it to cool a little bit before we start to assemble the pie. You don't want to be adding a really hot mixture with some pastry because it means your pastry is going to go soggy. Now what I'm just doing here is finely chopping some parsley, and I'm going to add this at this stage. I want to keep it really nice and fresh, so when it's cooled down, add that parsley, and then we'll give it a really quick mix to stir through that fresh parsley. can add some chives to this too, fantastic. And now I'll bring a pie dish. You can use any type. This is actually a gratin dish, but it works perfectly for this. And then we'll just pour in our mixture. Look at that. It looks like the original meat pie mixture without the meat. You can fool anyone with that. Now spread that out so it's even. Now I like to use puff pastry for my topping. This is 2 millimeters thick, so I've rolled it out. Now before I place this on, I just want to make a little glue with some eggs. So 1 egg into a bowl of water, and this is about 1 to 2 tablespoons of water. It's just to dilute the egg a little bit. With a fork, break it up and give it a good whisk. And now just with a pastry brush, I'll just brush some of this mixture just around the sides of the gratin dish. And then we'll get our puff pastry. I'll just take off a piece of plastic. We don't want that in our pie. And when I've cut out the pastry, it's 2 centimeters wider than the dish, just so I can tuck in the sides, almost like a little blanket. And how I'm doing this is just pinching between my fingers and then pressing down, just so it's overlapping. It can be a little bit rough. And then when you come to the end, just press it nice and firmly. Now I'll brush this with some more egg wash so it goes golden brown. I've preheated my oven to 190 degrees, so I want it to be quite hot. You need a hot oven so this pastry really puffs up. So once I've finished brushing this, I'll score it just with a little sharp paring knife, then it can go into the oven. I'm going to say this is going to take about 30 minutes or until it's really golden brown and that pastry is flaky and crispy. Well, I'm very impressed with this mushroom pie. It looks fantastic. Sounds really crispy. Have a look at those layers of phyllo pastry. You know that's good quality pastry. Now I'm going to serve this up. Always with a pie, bring it out of the oven and just allow it to cool a little bit because it's piping hot. And then I'm going to serve a nice generous chunk of this. I'll take the top off first, which is slightly sacrilege, but I just want to show you how gorgeous that filling is inside. It seriously looks meaty, but it's all mushroom goodness. I'm going to add that to my plate and then just pop that little pastry lid on top. That's a delightful pie. You see, sometimes you don't always need meat. Mushrooms are a fantastic substitute for meat. We've used red wine in there so it's deep and rich. It's perfect for a cold winter's night.